The whole building relationship thing is key across every aspect of anybody's business. So making sure that you have a good footing within your industry amongst other designers and the media. Get to know people. I mean, it's exciting, it's inspiring. How do they do it? Breaking down barriers and talking to people, but also building up a trusted list of suppliers that have your back when things go wrong, building up a great team of trades that have your back when things go wrong, and just constantly working on looking after and nurturing those relationships. Really, really important, because I think our industry is really based on relationships.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Welcome to episode 14 of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I am talking with interior designer Lynne Bradley. If you listened to last week's episode or follow us on social media, you will know it has been our first birthday at More Time to Design this month. And this means you get the gift. Use our discount code FIRSTBIRTHDAY to receive 50% off your first 3 months. When you pair this with your 30-day free trial, that means you get from now till the end of the year and at less than full price. That means you can spend the rest of 2023 getting organised, having systems and processes in place, and building a better business ready for 2024 to be your best year in business yet. Also, if you are enjoying the podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. Reviews are one of the best ways for people to find the podcast. If you are unsure of how to leave a review, I will put in the show notes some simple instructions to follow. I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. This week on the podcast, we are meeting Lynne Bradley from Lynne Bradley Interiors. I have been a big fan of Lynne's work for so long, so this was definitely a bit of a fangirl moment for me. I have admired Lynne as I know she has done some amazing interiors work whilst having a small team, which is a business model that I think is so clever. Lynne's generosity in sharing her experience and wisdom in the industry was so lovely, and I hope you enjoy our design dialogue. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. And this week I am joined by none other than Lynne Bradley. Hi, how are you, Lynne?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Beth?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. As we were just saying before, we live quite close to each other, and I always admire Lynne's. She's got this fantastic wallpaper in her studio. So it's a real pleasure to chat to you today, and I can't wait to learn from you and your journey in interior design. So I love to hear and start each dialogue with, what can you see out your window today?
Well, I've decided to not be in my beautifully wallpapered studio because I'll get interrupted and there'll be noise of the Pacific Highway and traffic behind me. So I'm sitting in my home, and I'm very lucky I can look out to a large backyard with lovely green grass and my trees coming into leaf because it's nearly spring, yay. Blue skies, very lucky. So that's my outlook today.
Oh, beautiful. Sounds like a lovely spot.
It is.
So I would love to hear about your business, how you kind of started in interior design, and kind of what your business journey has been to date so far.
Right. So I actually have a background in music and arts administration.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting journey. And I kind of think that I was destined to become an interior designer right from the get-go, because I remember even as a 3-year-old sitting beside my mother and picking up her sewing scraps and making things. So it's always been there. Didn't know it existed. So I went down the music path. But during that music path and working in London and managing very famous musicians, I would be tasked with, as their manager, finding venues for them and setting the stage and designing the program and working out what they were going to wear. So it was constantly running in parallel and I had no idea. However, when I had, cut a long story short, when I had my children, I decided to explore the world of interior design, because at that point I'd already done up or started to do up my first home back in Australia, and knew that I had a bit of a flair for it and loved it and dived straight into it. And that was about 23 years ago. And I started my business as soon as I finished my design course, which I'm going to sit here and tell everybody who's listening, please go and get a job with somebody else before you do that. Because I spent many years inventing a wheel that had already existed, did a lot of work, made a lot of mistakes, which was good. You learn from those mistakes. Yeah. But yeah, the journey has been, since the beginning of my business, raising my 3 children. So I worked from home for many years during that time. I said no to more work than I said yes to, because kids came first. But I did learn a lot. I also volunteered a lot. I did a lot for the schools that my kids went to, and built up a network through those systems. And then got to the point where I thought, right, it's time to move out of the home office. I rented a studio locally, really cheap rent, keeping the costs really low. I'm still there nearly 8 years later. And I took on staff and let the business go, and, said yes to everything and let it really build up. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow. Okay, I've already got like a list of questions. I told you.
Oh my
I'd
goodness.
go off track.
That didn't take long.
No, not at all. Okay, so to start with, I would love to know, and I'm coming from this as a mum to small children with a design firm. I started my design firm when my eldest was 6 months old. So, I've run the gauntlet of growing a business and growing children at the same time.
Yes.
How did you navigate that between, you've got a growing business, like you've started a business, it's kind of like, okay, like that pull between saying no to work, but also wanting to grow the business?
It's a tug of war. I've struggled with it for years, because I just want to go, but I also wanted to prioritize my family.
Yeah.
So it was a juggle. I would work late into the night, as soon as I got them down for a nap or off to school or whatever they were doing, I would just work. And I used to have this masonite board of timber, and I would put all of my work and all of my sketches and everything would be sitting on that. And then I'd lift it up and put it on top of the fridge when they were awake again. And they'd go to bed at night and I'd work into the wee hours. But one thing that I did spend that time, I felt like it was a really good opportunity to continue studying during that period. And one thing that I was going to advise any listeners today is to not just embrace learning the craft of design, but really learn the craft of business.
Yeah.
I'd highly recommend looking for short business courses, being mentored by other people who run businesses. There's a fantastic thing called mentor walks. You can sign up on and meet with people and go for a walk, and you get assigned to somebody and you can pick their brains, and they'll often turn into a mentor for you. I did everything and anything I could get my hands onto. Yeah. And the juggle is really hard. It was sleepless. Don't regret it, but I had a lot more energy back then.
Yeah.
So you've just got to go for it. I think it's a really good opportunity to develop your craft. Work for people as a gopher, don't even expect to get paid. Try and get some work with designers and worm your way into the industry as best you can. Join the DIA. It's a wonderful body that is improving constantly. You can join it as a student. You can join it as a design practice. There's so many great sources of information through that organisation, and the opportunity to network with people that will help your career develop.
Yeah. So one of the other things that you said, which I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So I suppose during that period of time when your children were young and you were kind of like, not that your business was on hold, but it definitely kind of was like building slowly.
Correct.
Did you have like, was it kind of strategic, or was it just something that you kind of knew would help while you're on the soccer field and at the school picnic and all that kind of stuff, building those networks so that when you had more time and you had more, space to take on more projects and to let the business grow, did you feel that you had kind of really taken best advantage of those networks that you have at that time to kind of open up your potential client base?
I didn't do it consciously.
Yeah.
I'm all for being authentic in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah.
I probably can look back at it and say that they were my networking opportunities that were happening intuitively. I didn't plan them.
Yep.
I didn't stop and think, oh, I'm going to make sure I stand with this person and get to know them and have my child have a play date. No, I couldn't operate like that. I'm a very authentic person. I couldn't sleep at night if I was. I believe in being very strategic, but that would feel wrong to me. So, however, like out of, generosity, we opened our house for, I don't know if they do that anymore, but different year groups would have cocktail parties in different people's homes. So we would open our home out of generosity because somebody was looking for a space, but it actually did turn out that people then got a chance to look into my home and think, oh, I might get her to come and do whatever. So it kind of happened and I watched it happening rather than me being strategic.
Yeah.
But, looking back on it, yes, you can be really strategic about that.
Yeah.
And authentic at the same time. I'm sure you can do both.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that's the thing. Like I suppose strategic was the wrong word, but I suppose it's that I know sometimes you kind of go, oh, I can't get to the networking drinks or the whatever it is. But I think being open to the fact that it might be 5 years down the track, but the mum that you happen to meet on the soccer field who, that conversation that organically flows. Yes. I suppose just kind of be open to everyone is a network and everyone, you never know where that conversation is kind of
100%,
coming.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's, we talk about brand and all that kind of stuff, but you are a brand and being that brand in all of those areas can be really helpful down the track.
I think so too. And I don't think I was doing it. I didn't realize at the time. But, how you present yourself, how you speak to people, what your home looks like, maybe how you're parenting even, because they're representing you as well, of course, wasn't all instrumental, but I can see that it did have a bearing on the growth of that network. And interestingly enough, that network still comes back to me today.
Yeah.
So, people who from that network are still reaching out, we've moved, we've downsized, we've got a beach house, can you do our parents?
Yeah.
So any opportunity, I think the earlier the better to start building relationships with people.
Yeah.
And a really big thing, I'm sorry, I'm digressing here.
No, not at all.
The whole building relationship thing is key across every aspect of anybody's business.
Yeah.
So making sure that you have a good footing within your industry amongst other designers and the media. Get to know people. I mean, it's exciting, it's inspiring. How do they do it? Breaking down barriers and talking to people, but also building up a trusted list of suppliers that have your back when things go wrong, building up a great team of trades that have your back when things go wrong, and just constantly working on looking after and nurturing those relationships. Yeah. Really, really important, because I think our industry is really based on relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So the other kind of thing that came out of your initial, when you were talking about your business, is how you kind of moved from having a home studio to going into having, your own office. Yeah. And so often, especially people who maybe work for themselves, like by themselves, or just have a small team, there can be that financial decision. Do I really need an office and all that kind of stuff? What was your driver to make that decision?
The big driver, as we chatted about earlier, was that children were sick of doing their homework under the kitchen table because there was stuff everywhere, or people coming to the house. Reps would be coming to show me things. It just got to that point where it had to get more professional. I also felt unprofessional.
Yeah.
And I was ready. My children were at a point where they were more independent. I was ready to make that step. But I think it's really important. You actually have to be smart and be calculating, but you actually have to take risks. And you have to assess for, what's the worst that can happen if I outlay for a 12-month lease, it's going to cost me X. I'm taking a risk, got to sort out who's minding my children and how are things going to run. Just give it a go. If it doesn't work, you can reverse it.
Yeah.
I think that people are quite frightened and adverse to taking risk. Business is actually about taking risk.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah, wow. And so then the other thing that I'd love to know a little bit about your business. So you have a small team. You have yourself and one or two people who work with you.
So I have a senior designer who actually has a really big background in commercial design. So it was, again, a bit of a risk taking on somebody. I predominantly do high-end residential design, and I have a junior designer. So one of my, the ethics behind my business is that I want to pass on knowledge to the future. Mm-hmm. And I think it's extremely hard for up and coming young or, people changing career paths to get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
So I like to give back a lot. So I think it's really important that taking a junior designer on, they're not lent on. I think a lot of people take them on if they're starting a practice, they'll take a junior designer on because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
But it's not good for the growth of that designer. They need to be mentored by people with the right skills that can give them a stepping stone to their next job. I also have consultants. So if my load gets too heavy, I have design contractors that I can reach out to, not to actually create the designs, but to scribe.
Yep.
So documentation. I also have an architect that comes on as a consultant as required, engineers. I have an accountant that's on a monthly retainer, and a lawyer that I can reach out to as required.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, the team is actually more than the two designers that work in the studio, because they're all that whole team is quite regularly engaged.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you come to that kind of mix? Was it through trial and error? Like, have you kind of grown your head count and then gone, nah, this is too much. I like it when it's a smaller kind of core group with consultants when needed. Like, has it been a trial and error process, or have you always kind of known, I don't want that hassle of a big head count?
I never wanted a big head count, but I have tried a few different things over the years. Yeah. I got to the point where I had 4 staff members in the studio, and I learned very quickly, really at the 3 staff member point that's there every day, you end up managing people and it takes your hand off the creativity and the management of the business. Yep. So it's very hard to split yourself amongst everything, and you can't hand management over of the business to somebody else, really, in my opinion. So I decided that, the other foundation of my business is to give good quality design, but also good access to me and good attention to the client. So it's very bespoke, very personalized. And I think the team that I have right now, it's a great team. I'm very lucky to have the girls that are working with me, but the size of it is just right. There is staff management. I have to be across HR. That's another thing. I have an HR consultant as required. You need to surround yourself, again, it's the whole network, relationships, people that hold you up, that you can tap into their expertise as required, because you have to try and know everything, but you can't know everything. Yeah. And you need to be up to date with industry things. So even in an HR space, what's the latest industry rules around telephone usage, mobile phone usage in the office, or, hybrid working, things are shifting and changing all the time. So that team and, collaborators is a sweet spot for the way I like to work.
Yeah.
So,
And then from that, how do you manage your project load? Do you have a wait list? Do you kind of bring on more contractors if you do have kind of more projects coming in? Like, how does that, I suppose, that studio size then flow into your decisions around project load?
That's right. Look, I do have a wait list. Not always, that fluctuates depending on what's going on. I do work quite quickly. I can turn around because I've got a tried and tested team. I've got great suppliers. I've worked extremely hard, as I've said, about those relationships. I can turn things pretty quickly. So I can juggle, I could juggle up to 10 to 12 projects at a time of varying sizes, although I do kind of have a minimum size project.
Yeah.
And if it depends on the stage where the projects are at and how I can juggle things. If my team in my studio are completely occupied with documentation, that's where I outsource to a consultant. But I'm kind of driving it creatively the whole time. So, how much can I handle? But it's kind of risky to say no.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of measure, is this project so good, but they're not prepared to wait? Well, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
And bring in people. But I'm quite into running what I call a lean business.
Yeah.
So I try to keep my outgoings measured and controlled.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very easy, I think particularly for people starting out, there's so many great little courses and they appeal to your emotions, like, have you got this process in place? Have you done this onboarding process? And you can get very quickly drawn into spending an awful lot of money because you feel you should have this and you should have that. I think you can keep it very lean, and I don't think you need all of that.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the way I manage it at the moment.
But yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think so often when you start a firm, so my experience was I kind of knew that I never wanted to take on staff. In my previous roles, I had managed teams, I had been through that, and I was like, that's such a headache. And it is, it can be amazing, but it can be a headache as well.
It's hard work.
Yeah. And I find that a really interesting discussion. Sometimes people are like, why don't you want to grow your business? And I'm like, well, I don't necessarily think big team means successful business.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't equal growth.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
It can be the opposite, in fact.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And I think as well that you touched on, there is a tipping point where you go from being a designer to being a people manager. Correct. And when you start your business, most people don't start a business because they want to manage people. They start a design business because they want to design beautiful homes or spaces.
That's
so
right.
I think that can be an unexpected thing that comes out of
I think that shocks most people.
Yeah.
And I think, I also hire people that enable me. I don't need to hire creative problem solvers. Yeah. I've got too many ideas. Yeah. so, you've got to think about how you best operate and what type of team is going to best support you to realize your ambitions in your business. Not because it's very easy for staff to take you down a path you hadn't planned on.
Yeah. Yes.
So you do have to be really honest with yourself. And I think you've also got to accept, which I think a lot of people creative struggle with, that you actually have to be on top of the business side. You can hire an accountant to help you with your BAS and your tax and whatever, but you have to understand it and you have to be all over it.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a turn in the psyche of, business owners where you can't just say, oh, I don't know, I'm not a numbers person, I don't understand them.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah, and I just think it's a path. It's always, I'm going, oh, please take the time to learn, because it is such a pathway to disaster. Because
I think it's a little bit like technology. I always think, if you look at an aging population and they're, my parents would have said, oh, no, that wasn't in my era. I don't know how to do that stuff. And I do have a philosophy that if you keep abreast of current changes and trends, they're not all good, but you've got to keep having a go.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep up to date. I think it's really important. And I think the same thing with your business. You can't say, I'm not good with numbers, I don't want to do the business part of it. But you have to.
Yeah.
If that's not for you, maybe being in business isn't for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're better off, finding a really great job and working for somebody and taking that pressure off.
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, so many great bits of information there, Lynne. So I would love to talk to you about colour, because your projects always stand out to me with their use of colour. So it's not colour that is on trend, it is a really elegant and sophisticated use of colour, like the pink, like the terracotta-y pink colour that you used in your Beaufort Court kitchen. It's just stunning. And the name escapes me. It is the one that is currently on the magazine House and Cycle?
Yeah, it's a one-shot magazine for luxury bathrooms.
And it's got this beautiful terrazzo tile, which you've obviously pulled one of the colours out for the joinery, and it's like a burnt orangey umbery kind of colour.
It is, yeah.
And it's just beautiful, and it's not an on-trend colour or anything like that. And you've got blue kitchens, and I could go on, but I would love to know how you take your client on that journey of getting those colors approved, because so many of us, you know, I was actually at a lunch the other day talking to a designer who loves color, but she's just doing a lot of gray and white kitchens. And she's like, I just don't know how to get that happening. And I quite often think it's about taking the client, the ability to take the client on the journey for them to feel confident to use those colors. So how do you do that?
Well, look, you know, most people have, they like the idea of color, but they're scared of color. And I'm kind of, I'm going to liken it to, often I'll turn up to a project and I think everyone's going to chuckle in the background, but somebody will say to me, I want a Hamptons look. It's a really common request. And I just shudder on the inside. And I have to dig into, well, what does Hamptons mean to you? What does color mean to you? And often it's not our perception of the things that they're negative about. Often there is a negative association in someone's background with a color or a texture, or not necessarily the color, but a combination of colors. Maybe as a child, they were dressed head to toe in orange in the 70s and they, you know, freaked them out and they hated it. You know, like it could be anything. So you've got to try and delve into the why. But the reason I use color, I'm very influenced by the architecture that I'm working within. That project, Clarendon House, where we've got the big round bathtub with the terracotta and terrazzo. That was because there was a lot of stained glass windows in the house and very rich marble fireplaces and beautiful Victorian home that had been kept in its style quite closely. But I was there to bring in a contemporary twist on things. But, you know, the colors spoke to me from the environment, but also there was a terrazzo step at the front door. So I was kind of linking the heritage of the property through materiality. And the color, it needed to be warm. It was a dark space. So for me, colors are often selected to accentuate something or counterbalance something. I don't just use it because I'm feeling like I'm going to do a blue kitchen today. You know, very occasionally someone will request color, but mostly they won't. And so I basically show them how it can work. You know, we can do it in this color. I do rendered 3D perspective drawings through my process of presentation. So people are seeing them fairly photorealistically and they know what they're going to get. And they will often say, gosh, I would never have thought of that, but I get it. It looks really good. And it's really about working out, how does your client want to feel in the space? Is the aspect of the room southern? Is it dark and feeling a bit cool? Hey, I'll warm it up. Do we need to make something recede, come forward, be taller, be wider? That's my subliminal approach to color. And often if there's an architectural feature like a post that's incorrectly placed in the middle of a room, let's talk about that elephant in the room and let's really play it up with color, with texture, materials. I love having fun with that, you know, like the bottom step of a staircase. Let's paint that in a color or clad it in a beautiful stone. Or let's paint the first post in the staircase a color and just do everything else in black and white. So it's really, I just get fed by the space. And I guess my enthusiasm potentially comes across to the client. And I think having a confidence in the use of color and communicating it bravely to somebody probably helps to build the client's trust, and they go, she knows what she's doing, let's give it a go. It's kind of the way it goes with me. But I think also when you've been in business in a while and you've been visible for a little while, you know, my aim in my business is that people come to me for their projects because they want what I do. However, I've had many people, you might see there's a project, Apex House, on my website. My client loves white, all white, everything white. So I had a lot of fun with playing with all different whites and a few contrasts of charcoals and blacks.
Yes, you've done that beautiful kind of striped fireplace detail.
Oh, yes. And that's just 2 different whites. So, you know, that's, I guess it's using a tonal aspect rather than color aspect, but just have fun. And, you know, most, you know, a lot of people say, look, I've got to keep it safe for resale. I can't go too wild. But no, I think that if you do something well and it makes sense in the space, I don't think it will polarize an audience. So I just think just don't be afraid and let the space talk to you and give it what it needs.
Yeah, and I suppose in essence, you're not using color for the sake of using color.
No,
You're using color because it works with what's happening in the space.
correct.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And that's such a difference kind of thing.
Yeah. And then I always have this, I guess I do consciously think if I was, and I do a bit of painting in my spare time, you know, if you're painting a canvas and you might have a large area that's in blue, you just need a little dot on the far left-hand corner to create balance. So balance is quite important. If I am going to go hard with a color, how can I balance it out so that each room isn't individual? They talk back to other spaces.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Awesome. So the other thing that you do a lot of in your projects is custom items. So I always notice your custom rugs. You seem to get one into most projects. And I would, I think sometimes, especially if you haven't been exposed to a studio where it does a lot of custom work. So, you know, in my background, I worked in high-end studios, so we did custom everything. But I think if you haven't had that exposure, it can be a little bit daunting, or you might not even know that that's an option. Why do you use custom items? I suppose is the first part to the question. And how then do you, like, I suppose the more technical side of things, like what are the things that you have learned over the years to make sure you're checking and specifying and noticing when you are looking and ordering and creating those custom items?
Right. Two big questions.
Yeah.
Why do I do custom work? Look, typically I think most designers do things that are custom to fill a gap what you can't find in the market. I'm very fortunate to stay in Ferndale Hotels, designed by Kit Kemp. And I was given a tour of one of the rooms, and in every single room, there was a mannequin. And the mannequin was covered in a beautiful fabric. And I said to the person showing me around, I said, I see these mannequins everywhere. What's that all about? And Kit Kemp has this signature mannequin in every room. And it's set to her physical height. And it's about bringing back the human element into each space.
Yeah, wow.
And I think if I consciously think about it, I probably like to do, while I'm trying to fill a gap that I can't find that thing, I also like to identify the architecture, the color palette, the people living in it, what the problem solving is, and give them a unique response to that space.
Yeah.
So it's kind of has turned into something that I'm doing a lot of. And it is like, you know, particularly from the rug point of view and working with Designer Rugs, wonderful rug company, who support my work and hold my hand through the manufacturing process really well. You know, we're basically creating art for the floor.
Yeah.
And often clients don't have much of a budget for paintings on the walls or sculptures and artworks from that perspective, but to give them to think about putting art on the floor. The other thing I do is custom made furniture. Again, I'm working in a room at the moment that has a triangular shape, but the client has a squared off sofa. So I have to I've got a negative space. Often it's a negative space thing, and I've got an unusual shape. Or I don't want to waste money buying a great big area rug that goes under a sofa that you're actually spending a lot of money on it. You're never going to see it. It's probably going to discolor at a different rate. So let's fill the negative space from where your feet are that you can actually see and enjoy. So that's the kind of the why. But again, I'm going to go back to your relationships with really good artisans and good suppliers to make sure that they can support your requests. And anything that you do a custom design, it's extremely important to think about your materiality and the construction is fit for purpose. Yeah. Very, very important. And that your manufacturing aspect of it is going to support meeting codes. Yeah. Where's it manufactured? How's it manufactured? What's the warranty based on it?
Yeah. And I suppose
sampling.
As you touched on, like it all comes back to those relationships, like lean in on the manufacturer, because they're going to know all those technical details. And so creating that relationship, and as you said, so they've got you back, because you
still have to know all about it. It's a little bit like your business and not liking to do numbers. You have to know all about it. You have to have a big hard go at it, but then you've got to lean into the expertise of somebody who's got that behind them.
Yeah. Awesome. And do you find now that clients come to you and like have potential clients notice that you've done more and more of this custom stuff, and they're like, oh, I want like, I like that kind of, no one else is going to have this kind of thing. Are you
Some
finding
people
that?
want that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want what other designers are doing or what's all over the magazines. I think that's part of the element of being a high-end residential designer. One of the reasons people come to you is because they're going to get an individual response, something that nobody else has got, that suits them, suits their budget, suits their home. I think that's a really attractive element of hiring a designer who can do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a unique selling point, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And is that another thing that I've noticed in a couple of your projects recently is your kind of wall-mounted or floor mounted vanities that have got quite a unique detailed kickboard element to them, which I think is so unique. Like, we see so many wall hung vanities. Is that something that, like, how have you I've seen you've used them in a couple of projects now, quite different. How have you come to that design element?
So look, it's not an element that I'm like, I'm going to do that now. It's to cover up plumbing. I'm not going to lie. It's when waste is going down through the floor, I'm not averse to a good bottle trap or, plumbing exposed. And you can, these days get some fabulous metal colors, powder, whatever. However, often it's quite an ugly thing. I don't want my eye to go to the plumbing. I want to bring my eye to something else. So again, it's form follows function.
Awesome.
And it also can act, like vanities, if you're putting natural stone on them and, the amount of joinery, they can be extremely heavy. And this kind of plinth that I've been using gives me an opportunity to help to distribute the load of the vanity that's going on there. So that's also a kind of engineering decision.
Right. Okay.
How is that vanity? And this is how my design goes. How am I going to install that? How am I going to build that? How am I going to take the load into this crumbling old brick wall? Hang on, let's get some support from underneath and redistribute the load of that piece of furniture or whatever it is. So that type of thinking happens all the time.
Yeah. And to kind of, I suppose, take that a little bit further, and this is really getting into the weeds of like designer talk, but are you having conversations with like your builder and the engineers and the clients and going, okay, the site conditions, if we're going to do, like, say, a marble clad vanity that's going to be, if you want it wall hung, we're going to need a whole heap of engineering to go into the wall, and the cost of that is going to be this. But if we have it this way and we do, the plinth, and we have this, we don't have to have as much engineering. Are you having those kind of builder and design conversations with the client as you're going through this process?
All the time. All the time. It's extremely important. I think that's what they hire us for. They need us to understand, the buildability of our designs. I mean, that to me, in my designing, I talk to my girls and train them this way all the time. They might say, what about if we do this? And I'm saying, no, have you thought about how that can be built? What are the implications to the budget if we go that way? It's not just about, I've got my heart set on a color or a shape or a material. It's like, hang on a minute. How is it going to work? And what does it do to the cost? And is my client prepared to go on that journey? But at the moment, I'm working on a design in an apartment. It's a penthouse. And the bathtub and the shower at opposite ends of this ensuite, I'm going to flip because of the size restraints. But then I pick the phone up to my builder and I say, look, I'm in an apartment. I can't move the plumbing. Can I use the waste from a bathtub for a shower floor waste? I'm not going to just do it because it seems like a great design. I have to understand it, or I'll ring my joiner. I'm thinking of, flexing a radius of a piece of joinery to, whatever degrees. What's the flex in that material that as a substrate? Is that going to work? So I actually love that aspect of that. That really gives me a buzz because I'm learning all the time. So I'm learning from every build and problems that are unearthed. But I like, one of the things I pride myself in is knowing as much I can about the restraints of the site, the restraints from the clients, the budget before we design. I'll get my builder over to climb under houses or go in roofs or whatever before we even put pen to paper.
So this is my next question for you, because I find this, like in my own design process, I always have a builder that I bring in almost at like when we're measuring the space and kind of run through what we're thinking to get a kind of initial take on costs and any restrictions and all that kind of stuff. So I am a really strong believer in having the builder, or at least our builder, engaged from day one, like in the conversation from day one. Yeah. How do you, is that something where, once again, it comes back to the relationships you've built? You have builders you can call on, and as you said, like, check, can I do this? Like, what can I do? Like, do you have the builder like kind of involved in the conversation from the beginning?
Not always. It depends on the project. And I think, you know, the knowledge that I'm slowly building over the years, there's a lot of things I can answer for myself because of it, positive and negative experiences in the past. Yeah. But as I require, I don't really do it a lot, but if I go to a site as a consultation and I perceive there to be issues, I will start that conversation or bring them to site early. Yeah. But yes, and this is, again, building, I can't tell a client legally, you have to use my people. Yeah. I can recommend them to them. It's their selection from legal. It's a whole other conversation, contracts. But, you know, I have got trusted people, again, that I've got teams of people. I never just have one person. You need more than one person that I trust and know will give me an honest answer, not because it's going to line their pockets to do something. Yeah. Again, the whole trusting relationship thing is everything. Fortunately for me, there's no cost to me to pick up the phone to a joiner or a builder or meet them on site, because I've given them plenty of work. So I'm very loyal to people. When I build up relationships with truly good people who are good at what they do and they're honest and hardworking, you know, we look after each other. So that's how it works.
Yeah. All comes back to relationships.
It really does. And trust. Trust everywhere, everything, with everybody. That's what it's.
Yeah. So you are in and amongst the industry. I know that you're very kind of big on going to industry events, and you've got a great standing in the industry. What are some of the challenges that you see in the interior design industry coming up? Like, I know, like, you work in the high-end residential sector, but for a lot of designers, they may work more in the kind of middle ground where there might be, you know, the economic situation might be at play. But what are some of the challenges that you see in the interior design industry at the moment?
There's actually a lot of challenges. We're living in a time that's moving very fast in technology and in health, you know, economic and environmental crisis. Yeah. There's a lot of shifts and change. You know, AI is a big buzzword, you know, buzz term at the moment. I'm quite an optimistic person. I will look to shifts and changes and think, how can that actually help me do my work better? Yeah. How can I engage what's coming out of AI to reduce the cost to my client? Is it going to make me more efficient with documentation or mood boards or things like that, rather than fearing change? I don't fear change. I embrace change. So I think finding ways to make the technological changes a positive shift in your practice is really important. Yeah. But I think, in saying that, my concern for the rise of AI is the loss of human connection. I don't think that can be replaced. I think what we do, I think there's elements in our processes that will be replaced by AI, but it can't replace the human connection and the trust and the personalization and evaluation. It probably will have a go at those things, but I don't. That will be met. That's my optimistic hope. Obviously, the economy has a huge effect on any business, small business, large business. You know, that's a huge consideration, which there's not much we can do about that, but we do need to be aware of that, and we do need to be empathetic to our clients and our suppliers and our trades. You know, that has a big effect on supply chain, shipping costs. You know, should we be thinking about, you know, we've got sustainability and carbon footprint, you know, should you be, my philosophy is to try and choose Australian made things first before I look to international things, but I'm going to choose the thing that solves the problem. Yeah. So I'm kind of conscious of all of that. I think that's a responsibility that as a designer we all have to think about. Another big issue, obviously, pandemics. I don't think that's going to be our only pandemic. I think we're in an era of pandemics. Yeah. How have we embraced that? I think we've all learned a lot of different ways to work. Hey, we're on Zoom right now. Yeah. You know, that's a wonderful resource. I think there's been a rise in e-design and e-consultations about design. I think that's going to increase. I think the whole hybrid working in terms of staff, we have to keep getting better at making that work. from working around it, because I don't think that's ever going to go away, even though, people are opening their offices again and wanting everyone back. There's no legislation shift about that at the moment. So I think if legislation changes, we're still finding our way. I think one of the big issues for interior design, which I bang on about probably to bore people every time I speak to them, is the education of what is an interior designer and what do they do, particularly in Australia. I think in other countries, there is a better perception of what that means.
Yeah.
Clients know what an architect does, and they never question what they cost.
Yeah.
Clients mostly think we fluff pillows.
Yes. Yes.
And there is this grey area in between, which is where we sit, because we do all of that.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand. So I'm a bit of an advocate about educating. So I can educate one-on-one with my clients. I can educate people that I work with and work for. But I think there is a responsibility for bodies like the DIA or the media to do a bit on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for that, because, you can present a fee proposal to a client, you've met them and you've told them what you do. But if they've never had a designer before, they get this big fee proposal. It's like, what is this for? What are they going to do for me? It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think we need to educate. I think all of these DIY shows and no names named, but, it hasn't done our industry any good.
No.
So education about what we do, what we're capable of, that's a bit of a thing for me. I think marketing your business in what is now a completely saturated marketplace is a big issue for us.
Yeah.
There is so many courses in interior design. Everyone's an interior designer, course or not, doesn't matter. I think that makes it, there's a lot of noise. It's very hard to be seen.
Yeah.
And something that's very hard, it's kind of easy to be seen in your industry, but it's very hard to be seen by your potential customer. How do you reach your customer? I think recruiting talented staff and retaining them is a huge issue for design practices. I think we're also facing the depletion of natural resources. That's going to shift everything. And I think quality control across our supply chain. They're kind of key. Sorry, that's a lot, but
no,
I think about a lot. Sorry.
No, I think that's really interesting. So like, oh my goodness, so many I could come back to, but a couple that I wanted to, which I think are really interesting, because it's a conversation that I hear coming up more and more, is that the intersection between architect and interior designer.
Yeah.
But then also how AI comes into that. And overall, the thing that I think is the thing that answers that question is, yes, education about what an interior designer does. But it comes down to, once again, communication and relationship. So, and also I think the other one that I can kind of loop into there is the social media part of it, because I think AI, if we can harness it for good, there'll be stuff that we'll be able to, as you said, automate in your business and therefore pass on like savings and build a better business. But then you're never going to be able to have a relationship with an AI bot. So that expertise that you bring to your clients and that relationship and the interpretation of things, I think is one of the amazing things that we do. And then also with social media, like, it is a relationship. If you use it well, it can be a relationship.
I agree. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I think so many of them are actually really linked, and it's about doing things well and not just kind of posting for the sake of posting, but, you know, looking into how that all works.
Yeah.
The other thing that came up when you were just talking, which I would love to get your take on, is I feel you've done a very good job for a smaller firm in getting published in magazines. And I think so often, you're right, you can get in front of your industry, but to break out of that and to get in front of the public can be very challenging.
Yes. Increasingly hard.
Yeah. How was it a real conscious decision that you were like, I need to get published, I need to get into magazines? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
And has that been something that you've kind of carried on through your whole career?
Look, it probably, in the last 7 or 8 years, I've become very conscious of the need for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, I'll be honest with you, there's a little bit of FOMO in there.
Yeah.
Other people are there. Why aren't I?
Yeah.
And that's okay, because you know, if that's what drives you to improve or to be visible, go for it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, there is obviously everyone knows there's a massive shift away from print media and to digital media. All of it's an important space, but at the end of the day, I've always subscribed, when I started to figure it all out, was it's really important to hire the best photographer that money can buy and a really good stylist.
Yeah.
And I guess at the very beginning, I would say to you in a calculated way, I think that there is some cross-pollination, that if I've got a good team behind me and my work, your work has to be good. It's not just about, you know, putting a mask over your work. But if your work is good and you've got a good team, then there's a bit more validity. However, I've had a conversation with a few different editors of publications, and their belief, which is very refreshing and humbling to know, is that if the images are good, they don't care who photographed them. They don't care who styled them. That is from the horse's mouth, or a few horses.
That's really surprising, because I think I've always gone,
wonderful.
If you get the photographer or the stylist are generally the people that hold the relationship with the editor. And so I've always thought, oh, if you use a certain photographer, like if you've got a certain magazine in mind, if you use a certain photographer, you might get to the top of the list, kind of thing. So that's really refreshing to hear.
I don't believe in that. I think that might have been true in years gone by.
Yeah.
I don't personally believe that now.
Yeah.
There's probably some publications that may still be the thinking, but generally I don't believe that's the thinking.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think it's actually refreshing to hear. It's a relief to know.
Yeah.
And again, you know, it's relationships with those people and being able to have that conversation with somebody, and actually, you know, I'm walking along with the perception of what the media is thinking. Well, when I actually speak to them, it's actually the absolute opposite.
Yeah.
And it's not to be afraid to unpack what, you know, how does it all work? And I think the same thing, how do you get published? I think if you, and I don't know how, in terms of when I do a design because it's the right response for my client, in the right budget, the right look for them and their lifestyle, etc. But I might be lucky enough when I get published that there is some synergy with the theme that the magazine's running. I don't know ever what that's going to be. Yeah. So they plan, obviously, future releases of, you know, a theme or a color or whatever their inspiration is for the time. You know, it's out of town jobs, rural jobs, it could be kitchens, whatever it is. They know that, but they don't tell designers that. And I wouldn't want to be designing to that in the hope that I got published. Yeah. That would be inauthentic design to me. So you don't need to know all of that. You need to do good work. And, you know, I will put out there loud and clear, I'm extremely humbled and grateful that my industry recognizes my work and wants to publish it. Yeah. However, it doesn't make the phone ring from clients. No. It's validation. It's me when I say when you choose a really good photographer and stylist, it's building a portfolio of your work, maybe with a view to a book one day, or having always, you know, an evolving website, just a good record of what you've achieved and you can show future clients. I don't think you should be making it an aim to be published for the sake of being published. You've got to think about what's the benefit of being published. Yeah. Yeah. You know, people are looking for different things. If it's ego, you need to leave the ego behind. It's not about ego, but it is for some people, I guess. I don't know. I can't speak for others, but it's harder and harder to get into print media, but I don't think it needs to be a measure of your ability to be a designer. Yeah. And take the pressure off yourself. Yeah. So everyone and all the editors will say today, we're all our own editors and publishers now. It's very true. Got to do it properly. Yeah, it's very, very true. And I think that advice to invest in the best photographer and the best stylist you can afford is priceless advice. I think you can have you've put all this effort into a beautiful project, and then to not capture it, I think is a shame. And I've been on both ends of that, you know, particularly early days, didn't have the funds for expensive people. Big mistake, because I've still spent all of this time, all of this money invested in this project, and I don't have a good record of it. Yeah. So what was the point? Probably my advice would be to photograph less of your project and be really honest. You might have done an amazing transformation on a job, but is it really worth photographing, or is it just you climbing up and getting your, learning the ropes? It doesn't actually have to be photographed, but get some fantastic iPhone snaps.
Yeah.
You can publish those yourself.
Yeah.
Don't have to throw big money at everything to get out there.
Yeah. And I think that also is, like, I think so often you kind of like, oh, I need portfolio, like I need to build my portfolio kind of thing. But I think there's actually, and I suppose you can say this in hindsight, but when you're in the moment, it can be hard. There is a desire to build your portfolio quickly and to show that you have this, massive work. But I think sometimes it can almost do you a discredit if you don't have the right quality of work in your portfolio. So I think that sometimes that some designers need to be a little bit more discerning about what they put into their portfolio.
Oh, it's extremely important. I mean, I'm taking things down all the time. Things that, I've developed as a designer, I don't want to be seen for that or sought after for that anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is, I don't know about you as a consumer, but I'm really happy to give someone who's got very little experience, but there's something about them. They've got an eye, they've got a hunger. I love a hunger. I love hunger in staff. I love hunger to learn and hunger to give people a go. I don't think it means you won't get hired if you don't have a big portfolio at all.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's other ways you can show that hunger and that skill and that creative flair.
Well, I think through Instagram, and I always, I do look at my job applicants when I'm interviewing. I look at their social channels. I want to see what they see. I want to see how they see the world. So as a business owner, put images out there, having a walk, so inspired by the warmth on my back and the sunshine and the colors of the bark on the trees. And, it's making me think about a new design or, that's really who are you? How do you see your world and how can you bring it to me? That's really that's the conversation you should be having, not an expensive portfolio of your work.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So where do you obviously you work a lot and you've got lots of projects on the go. How do you fill your inspiration cup and that kind of creative drive? Like, where do you find inspiration and who do you draw inspiration from?
Look, it's extremely cliche, but I get it from everywhere. And a lot of people say that, but it can be from, like, I was getting into my car coming home from the studio last night, and the local cafe had a stack of plastic crates stacked up ready for a milk delivery or something. And they were all in different colors. And I love them. I just looked at that. And I thought, oh, horizontal banding. Oh, I must do that. That's the answer to making this room feel wider. Like, it can be as banal or as glamorous. So I love traveling. And I must say, whenever I travel, I go, oh my God, this was so good, to fill my creative cup. However, nature, always a huge source. History, I'm fascinated in history. I love reading biographies. I'm hugely into the arts. I'm a bit of a muso still myself. I still sing. So performing arts is a big thing to me. Sounds, the light of something, something that I'm finding as I'm getting older, the scent of things is becoming more important to me. That's inspiring me creatively. So it's literally everywhere. On the page, I love fashion. Could be catwalk on the pages of a magazine, could be anything. So I think just being open, just letting your senses open up. And it could be, speaking to you, you're going to inspire me. There'd be something comes out of this. It's relationships. It's so many things.
Yeah, awesome. Now, we have touched on so many of these points, but already throughout the conversation. But if you had kind of one bit of advice to maybe someone who's thinking of starting their own studio, or maybe in the early years of their studio, what would that piece of advice be?
Can I give them two?
Of course.
Thank you. So go and work for someone else. And not necessarily work for them like, oh, I must see where's their contract? What does it look like? What's their process? Just go and work for someone else and immerse yourself into what it really, really means to be a designer. In a practice, think about whether that's where you're going to go to next. And then if you are going to start your business, I'm presuming that, the design skills have been attended to. go and do a business course.
Yeah.
And start talking before you open your business. Make sure you have an accountant and a lawyer, and you have good processes in place so that when your first client lands on your door, you're not scrabbling to create a contract or create, what are my stages of design? What does my mood board look like?
Yeah.
What's my angle and signature? Know it before you begin. Do the work, do the hard work first.
Yeah. That's awesome. Such very good advice.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to in your business for the next 12 months?
I love solving puzzles. I love new projects coming through the door. I've got a couple of projects in the books at the moment that I'm very excited about. We've completed the design of one of them. We're in a tender phase. We're in the midst of designing another big one and multiple other bits and pieces. But continuing doing what I'm doing, continuing to hone my craft and build new relationships. And I'm having a little refresh of my website. I just like the thing that I always look forward to in my business is learning to do things better. Yeah. Keep trying to improve what I'm already doing. I don't think you need to keep reinventing a wheel all the time, but you need to keep refreshing the wheel.
Yeah.
So I get excited by that. So
that's awesome. I really love that saying. I think so often we feel like we need to be new and shiny, but sometimes it's just a bit of a polish.
Yeah. And if it's working for you, don't change it. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, awesome. And where can our community reach out and find you?
So if they go to my website, there is a link to send me an email. I often do get contacted by small business owners or aspiring designers to kind of pick my brains about the business aspect of things. And I do consultations for people for that. So just reach out. You can DM me on Instagram or send me an email. And we can.
Awesome. And we will add all of that to the show notes for everyone. Lynne, I wanted to say thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I feel very refreshed, and my creative cup has definitely been filled because I've learned a lot today, and it's been a really lovely conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really inspiring.
Wow, Lynne was so generous with her experience and guidance, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did while I was chatting with Lynne. A few things that I took out from the episode as highlights was when Lynne talked about the importance of not just learning the skills of design, but also learning the skills of business. I think this is something that so many designers overlook or don't think is important, and it is just so crucial to being able to run a successful business. I also really loved how Lynne talked about the benefits of running a small and lean team, but how she's really built up her external consultants that she can call in when she needs to, so that she is able to manage her workload and not be limited in how many projects she can take on. I also really loved how Lynne talked about her use of colour and how much it really does affect the overall project, but also the influences that she draws on to introduce colour, and how she helps take the client on the journey so that they feel confident using colour. And then the other big point that I loved was our discussion around getting your work published, and how it's so many things, and how it's not necessarily going to open up the floodgates of new inquiries, but how it is really important to help build your profile and your credibility for when the clients do come knocking. I really hope you enjoyed this dialogue with Lynne Bradley, and I encourage you to leave a review or a rating if you did. This helps other designers find the podcast, and of course, if you would love to share it with your design bestie, I would appreciate that as well. See you next week for our next Design Dialogue. Thank you for listening to this Design Dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next Design Dialogue.